It took me 4 years to build from scratch my app from this to this. All of that alone while having a 9-to-5 job. In today's video, I'm gonna walk you through how I learned to build my language exchange app called Sevayu. In the process, I also explain how I learned to code, design, promote the app, and grow the user base to 4,000 plus users currently. I also drop some tips from here and there if you're interested in building your own business or application. If you're new to the channel, my name is Philip, and on this channel, I'm documenting my journey trying to build my own startup as a foreign solo tech founder here in Japan. If you're interested in starting your career or build your own business in Japan, please subscribe to the channel for similar contents. So quick personal background here. I major in telecommunication in college, so learning equally about hardware, network, but also programming. Programming was the subject that stuck with me the most. So prior to start my first job in Tokyo in 2017, I had 1 year of programming theory knowledge in college, 6 months of internship in a Japanese big corporate, but also 6 months of data engineering project in a Chinese university research lab. Back then, I was more looking to become a data engineer or data scientist because it was just more trendy and it seems to have a good pay as well. So I started my career in an insurance company in Tokyo as a data engineer for like 2 months, and then there was like a restructuring within the organization. And then I somehow ended up instead building web applications, especially chatbots. At the same time, during my first weeks in Japan, I've helped some foreign friends to do some like administration tasks, such as opening a bank account, opening a mobile line, but also signing an apartment lease. Those tasks require advanced Japanese proficiency. Even though back then I already got my Japanese JLPT N1, I still found myself improving in Japanese while helping my friends performing those tasks. So I had the idea of building a platform connecting foreigners who need interpretation help with local people who want to practice the foreigner's language. And that's how my app Sevayu was born. Back then, I knew Python and its Django web framework and had experience building from scratch my own personal blog where I document kind of like all the small pet projects that I built to build up my online portfolio. At that time, I didn't know what exactly an API is and how a web server exactly works. My blog that I built was more like copy-pasting the Django blog tutorial rather than a real web application. So pro tips here, business idea often come from trying to solve your own personal problem or someone else's problem. That's how I came up with Sevayu's idea. So as excited as I was when coming to work and live in Japan, I was even more excited to just finish my 9-to-5 job and then come back home to start to build my own little empire. I live 5 minutes walk from my company office, so right after my job, I can directly go back home and then just quickly hit the gym to refresh my mind, to switch to the builder mode and just start writing code. After having the idea of the platform I wanted to build, I quickly drafted the idea in a notebook and started to build my first prototype using the tech stack I already knew, which was Django. I learned for the first time what a REST API was and how Google Map API works. Back then, I didn't dive much into learning properly CSS. It was more like duct taping a bootstrap CSS theme together to make the app looks a little bit more decent. I also made the logo by myself, so learning to do that on an old software called Inkscape. Basically, I was just Googling how to make a chat bubble on Inkscape. I spent an average 3 to 4 hours on weekdays and most of the weekends learning how to code and to put things together. I still had a social life and often always accepted a friend invitation for dinner or a party. But basically, time that I have on my own was spent in my computer screen, coding, designing, learning new things, reading about building a business or a startup. After a few months of coding and building, I released the first prototype of Sevayu and promoted on a local Facebook group in March 2018. The idea seems to get some attention and around 140 people liked my post on Facebook, and a few days later 90 new signups. Not bad actually from just promoting on one Facebook group. But obviously, the app was far from being really usable and not really suitable for long-term usage. I also received some people's feedback and noticed that often people use Sevayu purely to find someone with whom to regularly practice a language with, or just making new foreigner friends instead of needing help at a specific moment. So after a while, I decided to focus Sevayu to be a location-based language exchange app to connect people in the same area to practice a language in real life. There was also more demand and I was also more excited about the idea. Pro tips here, get your idea or prototype out there to the world. You'll know what people actually want. So after deciding to pivot and niching my focus, I realized that the current tech stack wasn't really ready to scale. So the code base I wrote was a whole mess. I didn't know what I did back then. Even myself couldn't understand my own code. It was basically a huge monolith spaghetti code. So instead of trying to refactor the whole code, I decided to rewrite the whole code base using a much more modern tech stack, using React.js and Node.js. It was the first time that I learned about the role of a front end, a back end, and how everything is intertwined using APIs. So I had to learn from scratch how user authentication works, how to actually write proper CSS, but also how to build a responsible web app that can fit properly for both mobile but also desktop. Meanwhile, at my job, I also push Works project to adopt those modern tech stack so that what I've learned from building my own app can also be applied to my day-to-day job and vice versa. Pro tips here: if possible, try to find a way to connect and make use of the skills you use at work in your project and vice versa. If you're working in a marketing team, then building your own social media contents or online presence makes sense. I'm a software engineer at my job, so it makes sense for me to leverage that skill to code my own application instead of outsourcing. Since I was more in the learning phase, I tried to build things by myself and not necessarily relying on third party. Vendor lock factor matters, and third party software cannot be easily extended. And when you know all the ins and outs of a specific product feature or a technology mechanism, then you can later make educated decisions whether to use or not a third-party software. Months went by and I spent a solid 6 months from May to November 2019 rewriting the whole app in React.js. Again, my pace was similar, in average 3-4 hours on weekdays, sometimes 5. Most of the weekend I spent coding as well. During that building phase, I did zero marketing to promote the old version and was more addicted to build and write cleaner code, because sometimes writing software can be really addictive. For me, it was more like a learning curve to that modern paradigm of web applications rather than just chore that I need and have to do. After that phase, I can say to myself that from that moment, I can pretty much build any prototype or small web application by myself. I also just learned on the fly, the so-called just-in-time learning. Just learn the necessary skills needed to build the next feature for Sewayu. I wanted to add a real-time chat feature. I just Googled how to build a real-time chat and just end up learning about WebSockets. Once I grabbed the basic, I just integrated into the app. The basics of a new concept is usually not really hard to learn. The integration within your own application, that will be really hard. Every day I learn new things, and that also helps me to work more efficiently at my corporate job. Writing clean code, writing CSS that can scale, thinking carefully about architecting your applications, the basic of security, and so on. One important skill that I've learned was debug skill. Knowing where to start searching when trying to solve a bug will save you a lot of time and effort. Debugging skill can only be mastered when you encounter lots of bugs, digging into that by yourself instead of just ignoring them. There are infinite types of bug, like those involving the client code side, the different browser behaviors, the server response, the infrastructure, and the library dependency, and so on. Knowing how to tackle each of those is really important when you tackle bigger and bigger features that will bring weird and all sort of small bugs that might harm the user experience of your app. After releasing the React.js web app version, I started to promote Sewayu a little bit again on Facebook groups, create useful contents on social media. I was also experimenting buying Facebook ads at like $1 a day for like 3 months. My corporate job drains a lot of my energy, so the time remained when coming back home was dedicated to just building and writing codes. And yep, I was a software engineer, so I'm biased toward technical things, so I didn't put too much effort into marketing. The app was growing a little bit more and reaching to like a few hundreds of new people. There was a caveat. Most users prefer having a mobile app. It was a progressive web app. It has some mobile app feeling when you use it in the browser. Still, there were issues with something like the notification that was really unreliable. For an app that used a real-time chat feature, that can be a real churning factor. Also, having to deal with all the different browsers' behavior is something that is not really cool. From then, I decided to rewrite again the web app and make it into a mobile app. So the technology of choice was React Native, which allows me to write cross-platform mobile app for both iOS and Android using just a single code base in JavaScript. And since I already knew React, learning React Native wasn't really that hard. It was more like a refactoring rather than a rewrite. I didn't choose to learn Swift or Java Kotlin to write iOS and Android native app because my time was really limited by my corporate job, and I care more about having a working product rather than one that's super optimized that requires native code that I need to learn from scratch. From January to March 2019, it only took me 2 solid months to rewrite the web app into the mobile app. Pro tips here: don't be afraid to refactor or rewrite your code because it will pay you huge dividends later on. After I click on the submit button to submit my app for the first time on the App and Play Store, I was like, wow, I did it, dude. I realized that not only can I build a web application, but also a mobile application. That moment just opened me to so much more opportunities in Horizon. I gave myself a giant pat on the back and feel like I can learn and build pretty much anything on my own. So the next month, I quit my job. It was actually a decision that I already made a few months ago before the mobile app was released. It was exactly 1.5 years that I came to work in Japan after graduating, but also exactly 1.5 years that I was working on Seva.u days and nights. So I just quit my corporate job cold turkey, having in mind to get the business manager visa in Japan, which is one way to legally build and run a company in Japan. But the requirement was a little bit difficult to fulfill, and for a few months it was more like a period of self-reflecting, improving the app, doing a little bit of marketing, also going to some startup meetups. I also made a whole video explaining that 2 years ago, so if you're interested you can take a look in the description below. For the marketing side, I started to post some language learning tips on Instagram, filming myself, and it was more like a way to improve my public speaking skill and not be afraid to talk to the camera rather than just like trying to actively promote the app. Also, as a growth hack technique, I used to write like a web scrapper bot that will automatically send message to people on really like old language exchange websites to attract them to Seva.u. I got like hundreds of new signups in the span of a few months, but I kept getting banned on those websites multiple times. So I just gave up and instead focusing on a more organic way to grow the user base. Back then, I only had like a working visa in Japan, and that requires you to be employed in some company. So technically you cannot be unemployed more than 3 months, and that was my limit to make a decision. So after thinking a while, I just decided to go back to get a job and instead aim for the Japanese permanent residency. I made a whole video explaining that, so if you're interested, please check the link in the description below. So long story short, I went back to work for a Japanese startup for like 7 months and then quit. Then joined Microsoft Japan for 1.5 years, and then finally got my permanent residency in Japan, and then quit again to work full-time now on Seva.u. During that period of work, again, I was just improving the app, both like technically, but also trying to put more efforts in marketing. It was really hard at that time in terms of like energy and motivation to keep a full-time job while working on my app that I've been building already almost for 2 years without that much traction. Well, the time left after my 9-to-5 job was more dedicated to improve technically the app. I started to write blog article on Seva.u website about language learning tips, trying to rank better on Google search, aka search engine optimization SEO. I was also building another side project called Kotoha. It was a multilingual collaborative online dictionary where people can create a post with a rare expression in a language, and other people who know the equivalent in the language would come and add a translation. I built that side project to play around with some new tech, but also in order to boost SEO for Seva.u by leveraging user-generated contents and put a backlink to Seva.u on every post that user created. Again, didn't have much time dedicated to promote the project, so it just dies slowly without having any traction. It was purely the shiny object syndrome, where I was a little bit bored and tired of Seva.u a little bit, so I decided to look outside for a while when building Kotoha, but decided to come back to work on Seva.u after I shut down Kotoha, or just let it be on its own. Building Kotoha taught me a lot of new technical skills. I can apply directly those into Seva.u. So afterward, I just refactor my whole code again. When you build a product without much experience in programming, you tend to neglect the code architecture, the best practice, and over time, just accumulating technical debt as long as you can release your next new feature. During the time when I was working full-time at a Japanese startup, but also at Microsoft Japan, I was just like focusing on paying those technical debts, making the code more extensible for future features, adding more features, but also make it ready to scale. At the same time, I kept writing blog article for Seva.io and promoting the app on like subreddits, and after a few trials, I just got lucky and one of my Reddit posts just got like 700 plus upvotes. And it was just because I changed the title from Seva.io easily find a language partner in your area to I created an app to easily find a Japanese language partner in your area. Pro tips here, get to know the tone of the community you're trying to promote. Reddit members like authenticity more than everything else. That little tweak changed a lot. That Reddit post brought me like 500 new signups on Seva.io, and I was like, wow, it took me like 2 years or so to get to a few hundreds of members on Seva.io. I just doubled it with one Reddit post in one day. Back then I was like, that's it, the so-called product market fit. While calling my mom on the phone, the number of new signups just keep increasing, and I told her like, oh my god, my app is exploding in popularity. That's it, I'll become soon a millionaire. My server didn't crash at all because I spent time to make it scalable. After a few days, the excitement kind of like fade away. I realized it wasn't a product market fit at all. It was just like a one-time lucky event. But from the hundreds of new signups, I received plenty of feedback from people that helps me improve the app a lot. Months went by, and after my 9-to-5 job, I switched to Seva.io founder mode and just work on the product as well as a little bit of the marketing, spending time on SEO but also on ASO. People left good reviews on the app and Play Store and introduced the app to their friends. So the number of new signups just grew by like a dozen every day. Seva.io itself is a social network. The more people on the app, the more people want to stay on the app. But the opposite is also true. The less people in the network, the higher the churning rate. So it was kind of like the chicken and egg issue. For people to stay on Seva.io, it needs more people, but to attract more people, people needs to stay. So working on user retention is something that I've been fighting daily. After 1.5 years working at Microsoft Japan, I quit right after I got my permanent residency in Japan. And I also made a whole video explaining that experience, so if you're interested, please check the link in the description below. When I quit, I also made a post on LinkedIn that somehow went viral, and that post also brought me a few hundreds of new signups for Seva.io as well. More details about that in the video I just linked. From my past experience from Reddit, I knew that spike of new signup wasn't even near to a product market fit. It was just curious people wanting to try out the app. Still, lots of people stick and start using the app daily and also recommend that to their friends. To date, Seva.io has 4,000 plus registered members with a few hundreds of weekly active members. Now that I'm working on it full time, I need to take a step back and review my day-to-day task. Back when I was working on Seva.io as a side hustle, every contribution I made was a plus. I was kind of like wearing the CTO hat more often than the CEO hat. Now I need to carefully set priorities on what to work on, but also what not to work on. Trying to find things that can 10x the user base, but also things that really matters and just work on them relentlessly. Also focusing on user retention, marketing, but also organic growth. I believe that organic growth is the most sustainable way to grow an app in the long term, but sometimes paid ads for like shorter boosts can also help. At the same time, it's time for Seva.io to reach out to more people at a faster pace. And this day I also start to somehow make my first steps into the venture capital world, aka seeking for outside investment. A social network app like this really needs a lot of people to get traction. And I couldn't possibly grow it as fast as I want and as fast as the Seva.io community needs. So these days, in addition to improving the app, I'm also doing these YouTube videos, sharing my experience. Building my online presence through YouTube is also a good way to build Seva.io brand, attract potential investor or future business partners, or even hiring. It also helps leaving a trace of my journey to look back if one day Seva.io grows to become a big company. I also hope that it will inspire some of you who want to dive into this fascinating world of building your own little empire. Everything starts with a single action. Remember, it took me 4 years to get to 4,000 plus of registered members. I spent days and nights coding, debugging, designing, writing blog articles, talking to SaveIU members, all of that with the remaining energy left after finishing my corporate job. 4,000 plus users doesn't seem a lot, but I was building that community from scratch alone, and I had to learn everything on the fly by myself, and it was my first project, and I managed to stick with it for 4 years. Stamina, aka the ability to stick with some project for a long period of time, is really also a valuable skill to develop. I believe it won't be a linear growth, but rather exponential growth. To make that happen, I would need more resources, but also dedicated capital to grow SaveIU to the next level. Doing hard things, everything by myself, helped me build courage and confidence to fearlessly quit my job at Microsoft, even though I still don't get any money from SaveIU. But I'm confident that I can turn this into a legit and profitable business soon. If you want to support me, but also help SaveIU community to grow, feel free to try out the app and spread the word to your friends. It will mean the world. So that's it, my long story about building my side hustle while having a full-time job. If you liked the video and want to follow my journey as a foreign solo tech founder in Japan, please subscribe to the channels for similar contents and leave a comment if you have any question. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.